Again, good morning to everyone who has joined in on the call. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Lawrence Malaka, the Program Manager of the First Leadership Academy, and it's my pleasure as always to welcome you to the First Leadership Academy webinar series. And excited because it's the April edition and it's a very important and engaging conversation that we'll be having today. It's a pleasure to have every one of you here. I can see some names that are already very familiar with our platform. I want to say thank you for the consistency. I can see Mrs. Rose Didam of the Bank of Agriculture. It's a pleasure to have you here, Ma. I can also see Mr. Daniel Lime. Thank you for joining in. I can see Ms. Adito Adefala, you're welcome, Ma. Okwemi Razak, you're welcome, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. I promised that we'd start in about 5 minutes. That was at 10, but we're still expecting a good number. But while we do that, I would just read out a few rules that would ensure that we have a very good conversation. Rules, and this means that participants are free to use the information received, but neither the identity nor the affiliation of the speaker nor that of any participant may be revealed. So it's a learning platform. It's for us to rub minds together and share experiences on the topic of culture in our organization. So yes, you can take the learning points. And please, if your name is not in full, thankfully everyone on the call at the moment have their name and their surnames written out. So I don't think I'll need to read out that rule, but just in case if anyone is joining in, their name should be in full. And to rename that to your personal name, just go to the participant section, click on the more icon and on the name, and then click on rename, and that way you can type in the full name. To speak during a session, because we do not want to do the talking alone. We'd like to hear from you as well, your questions and your comments. To do that, kindly click the reaction tab to raise your hand to ask a question. And once you've been highlighted to speak, once you're done, you click on it as well to drop your hand after speaking. Always, always, always remember to mute your speakers after speaking so it doesn't interfere with whoever is speaking at the time. So always ensure that you're muted so we do not hear your background noise, and the background noise doesn't interfere with the conversation. And if you have any questions, if you'd rather type in your questions than ask it, you can just drop your question in the chat box and they'll be addressed during the Q&A session which will follow after each conversation. And as usual, after the webinar, the replay will be sent to our email so that you can watch, you can share with your team and have conversations around the topic with your team as well. This year we've had very interesting conversation on the webinar series. I remember very well our conversation on corporates, moving from corporate turnaround and recovery to corporate transformation and growth, which challenged team leads, CEOs, and chairman of boards who attended that event to begin to think further than recovery. But the pandemic hit us on our knees real hard, but instead of just focusing on how do we recover from this, how do you get ahead, how do we transform, how do we grow, and our webinar speakers did justice to that topic. Also, just last month, we're celebrating the International Women's Day, and to celebrate that, we had a conversation around gender gap in management, building a strong pipeline of women leaders. So we highlighted the achievements and the accomplishments of women across the world. Women are doing good jobs. We're seeing that a lot of women now, or girls, are getting into schools, they're getting into STEM jobs or good jobs, but we've noticed that as you go up the ladder, it seems to be falling off somewhere, especially in the areas feels like the oil and gas, the energy industries. We still have women, will I say, dropping the baton at some point in their career. So that conversation was to understand why, what are the challenges that they're facing, and how an organization can make the space good enough for women to thrive. And I remember we also had a very good conversation, showing one of our speakers pointing out that women shouldn't just sit down and sulk and say, oh, I don't have a seat at the table, but prepare yourself to be a of today's conversation around leading culture in your organization. It's a very, very engaging topic. We've heard so many things on the news. Just last month, there were topics, conversation on Twitter around horrible bosses, toxic workplaces, a lot of things, people in the organizations. We have policy documents or policy handbooks, but it's one thing on paper and it's one thing that's been acted out in the organization. So we want to talk to that, and we have well-experienced speakers who would speak to this topic, and hopefully would also hear your views and your own experiences in your workplaces about how you are leading change as maybe head of HR, as a team lead. How are you driving change? Because we understand that an organization might have its own culture, but there are still subcultures. The finance department has its own culture, sort of how it does things. The procurement has the way they do things. So how do you as a leader ensure that everybody works well and you have a culture that would help you drive your business strategy? And that's the conversation that we'll be having today. It's a pleasure to also know that our facilitator is online as well, Mr. Charles Buckman. Good morning, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here. And we also have our GMD who will give a keynote address this morning, Dr. Oluola Sade. It's a pleasure to have you both on the call, and we can't wait to culture. So while we wait for another, let me check the time now. It's 10:13. So in the next 2 minutes, while we officially hit the ground running and start conversations, I would like us in the chat box to share. I want to know what does culture really mean to you? What do you think it is? Across the world, across organizations, there are different interesting definitions. So I would like to hear from you what's your definition of culture is. So in the chat box, I would like you to introduce yourself, where you're joining us from, and what culture means to you. What culture means to you, or how you live out how culture is expressed in your organization. So I would love to hear. So in the chat box, you can just type in your name, where you're joining us from, and what culture means to you. So I'll be in the chat box to see the comments that I have. My apologies, I may have called our facilitator should be Dr. Charles Buckman. My apologies, sir. Dr. Charles Buckman is on the call with us, and I'm sure he's also looking forward to hear your opinions and views where you're joining us from and what culture means to you. What culture means to you. So what does organizational culture mean to you? I've seen an interesting, I saw an interesting definition or approach to culture. Someone described it as civilization in the workplace, So it's sort of like a social control system that guides people on, that, would I say, promotes good deeds and punishes bad deeds. So, but I would like to know your opinion to what culture means. I'm still checking the chat box. I haven't gotten any response. Okay. So we have Adito Adifala from Lagos, and she says culture can be described as the way people behave and relate with one another. Culture, interesting, and Mr. Daniel Yume says corporate culture refers to the beliefs and behaviors that determine how a company's employees and management interact and handle outside business transactions. Corporate culture refers to the beliefs and behaviors that determine how a company's employees and management interact and handle outside business culture. So for Mr. Daniel, it's focused more like outwards, what we're pushing out to the world as an organization. So how do we interact and how do we handle outside business transactions? And for Adito Adefala, it's the way we behave and relate in the organization. So for her, our definition is more inwards. How do we interact, as teams in an organization? How do we work together? And for Mr. Daniel, it's more like how do we handle outside business? So these are already very interesting definitions. I hope to see more in the chat box. But at this point, I would like to turn 15 already. So at this point, I would like to invite the group managing director of the Tel First Group, Dr. Olu Olasade, to come and share the keynote address. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and it's been interesting just listening to the opening remarks and comments made by people on the platform. What culture is, can you take off the screen share so I can share documents?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Right, I'm just going to share a document and then we'll make that a very brief talking point. Just give me a couple of seconds.
Okay, so while we wait for Dr. Lola Sebe to bring up the slides, I'll just keep reading out the comments in the chat box. Engineer Lusoji from Kaduna describes cultures. He said, culture represents people that shares the same values, beliefs, attitude, and symbols in the organization. That's powerful. Culture represents people that share the same values, beliefs, attitude, and symbols. So that means that even if you want to get into an organization, you should be looking out for what are your personal values as a person, and does it connect and relate with the values of this organization you like to work with, that you like to transact with. I'm looking at the definition of Engineer Olusoji from Kaduna, and then Opayemi Raza from Lagos. Oh, okay. So
yeah, carry on. You can read out the comments.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
You can read out the comments.
Opayemi Razak says, culture is a way of doing things or the behavioral atmosphere of an organization. The way of doing things or the behavioral atmosphere of an organization. So for him, when he steps into the room and he taps that energy, like the atmosphere, what is it saying about this person? So that's where the culture is. And Eniola Dioshun from Lagos says, culture is the way we behave, relate, and take decisions in an organization. I like that third part, how we take decisions in an organization, how we take that's culture, how we take decisions in an organization. And the thing is that organizational culture drives and promotes innovation. So it's very important that we set a culture that allows people to be innovative, to think outside the box, or think like my German say, like there's no box at all. So yeah, culture is the way we behave, relate, and take decisions. And having very, very interesting definitions here in the chat box. So I'd like to check with you if you're ready to go now, sir.
Yes, let's carry on. Right, you can see my screen, and I'm just going to say something for a few minutes because I have another meeting to attend. So I will come back and be part of the discussion later on. It's great to see Dr. Charles Buckman, my good man and colleague based here in London, Milton Keynes. I'm sure Milton Keynes is as pleasant as London is, Dr. Buckman, but we look forward to hearing from you.
Yes.
A little bit later. And it's great to see people who've joined from Lagos and from Abuja and Kaduna. We hope to have a few more people. So like I said, maybe it's very end, I will come back in if I'm able to. So the topic is on leading change in your organization. An organization within this context does not mean a company. So if you have a social enterprise, if you have a community activity, even in your family, even in your subset and in your society, subset of your society, it's still a collection of people, like somebody said earlier. So there is an understanding that the change you're discussing today is not just about you, but about a collection of people, as we heard earlier. And so we think within that context. The first thing to sort of note in our minds is people. And there's research. I was at an event around culture some time ago in UK, and there was this research about the greatest problem of humanity, and that is about people. Do you know people are your problem? Because you don't have a problem with stones or with tables and chairs. If you do, you can deal with them. But people are also the solutions. And that is interesting thing. So it's all about people. People make things happen, and people create the culture. So if the culture is good, it's about people. If it's bad, it's about people. And people create the problems that the culture is trying to address in the first place. So just bear that in mind. So the people issue is quite complex and difficult to deal with. So when within the context of an organization, people have defined culture, and we heard I heard someone talk about behavior. Can't remember, a lady mentioned behavior earlier, and someone mentioned beliefs. So these are keywords that you expect to come across when you're discussing issues around culture. So definitions can be as numerous as anything. So don't get stuck with definition and be lost in that, rather than the real issues behind culture. In one of the organizations we worked with an organization appears in Lagos a few years ago, actually. And they a very profitable company. It started to make reduced profit, and the share the value reduced, and the share prices was reducing drastically. And they asked us to come and do some transformation work. And when I said to the chairman, I said, the bulk of this work is about people. It's not, we could give you a nice business model that we think you can work with. We can give you some processes, some tools for re-engineering and all that, and it will be nice and glossy pieces of paper. But the bulk of the work that needs to be done is around the 2,000 or 3,000 people that you employ within your organization. And when we started the transformation work, we realized actually it was centered around people. So that's why it's important, just to go back to that key introduction. Everything is about people, 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 and people. Now, culture is normally defined as a collection, and I said this at the beginning, it's not an individual issue. If it's an individual issue, it's just behavior. And we'll talk a little bit about behavior. But when you have a collection of behaviors, as it were, you talk about culture. And then there is within that expectation. So once there's an understanding of how we behave as a people, that understanding creates expectation of how one should behave as a people. So if you walk into an organization, if you walked into, say, Apple head office or Google head office, or many of these companies that are known for good culture and behaviors, and you're new, there's an expectation of how you should behave. And if your behavior comes outside the norm, you are corrected. This is now how we behave. And we do the same at Theophilus Group. If people behave, and when I say behavior, I'm not just talking about attitude and conduct. I'm talking about professionalism. I'm talking about competence. So if you fall outside a normal, as it were, distribution, you will become an outlier. So that's what makes it a set of practices that inform your actions as a member of a team. So when you think about culture within the organization, you think about what's the expectation of people within this organization. Now, I'm going to come to something interesting at the very end of my address, which is the expectation is not what you write on paper. The expectation is how people behave. So you can go into many organizations and they have a set of rules and actions and behavior. This is how we must behave in this organization. But the reality may be different. So the expectation is based on the reality of how people behave, how people act in certain circumstances, rather than what you've written down. So you need to move away from rules to actual behavior of people. And that's what you need to be thinking about changing when you look at change in your organization. So what you're saying is people are expected to act or deal with situations in certain ways. We must remember that we are not robots, and Dr. Charles Buckman will talk a bit about this. We're people with free will. So you can't force, as one would do in the military, people to act in certain ways unless you can influence their mindset. So it's a mindset. It's you need to convince someone that this is the proper thing to do. So we heard some of you talked about, and I heard in the open conversations around toxicity. When people behave in just irrational ways, how do you deal with that? Now, you don't deal with that just by punishing them or isolating them. You deal with it by making them understand why their behavior is wrong. The economists will say human beings, we're very rational and we behave in the right way. We know. So one of the ways you address culture is not by introducing more rules, it's by making people understand what kind of belief and what kind of actions are acceptable in an environment like that. When we did the webinar series last month, I think it was, on gender equality. A lady who was quite senior already in the civil service made a comment that when she first started within the civil service, well, within that organization that she was at, or was it private sector? I can't remember. Someone who was meant to be a subordinate refused just to act in the proper way because she was a woman and he was a man. And he said, women in my house stay in the kitchen and cook. They don't give me instructions. Now, that is not acceptable. Now, the interesting thing is, how do you deal with that? In an environment where a lot of men have developed that mindset that women can give instructions. How do you influence their thought and their mindset and their behavior? You don't do it by bringing more rules and laws. You need to have rules and laws and guidance, but you do it by making them understand that we are no more in those age of inequality. If you can imagine what the President Lincoln went through, Abraham Lincoln, when he was trying to convince his colleagues, the white colleagues, that the Black people were not animals and they shouldn't be subject to slavery anymore. And he was trying to pass the bill, and we know he was killed afterwards. Because the culture had found it acceptable in terms of slavery to sell people as animals. And that belief was so fundamental that they thought it was foreign for you to say a Black person and a white person are the same, sit on the same level in the bus, nothing about colored discrimination. So the same with women, the same with many unacceptable things that people have over time believed was okay. So shaping belief and mindset is a fundamental part of changing culture in an organization. So you may walk into a place and your issues are not like these, as extraordinary as these, but there's certain things that's been acceptable. People will come late to work, is acceptable, and you're trying to change that. That's quite interesting. All of you this morning joined the meeting quite on time, but perhaps it's because you know that this is TL First Group, First Leadership. You know that we believe in professionalism and timeliness. But if it was another organization or other events, 1 hour after the start time, you're still waiting and they're still waiting. And people find that acceptable. So when the program manager was saying this morning, we do apologize, we're going to start a few minutes late, just wait for people to join. You go into some places. Somebody had a meeting with me here in London, funny enough, yesterday. He's a very important person. He runs a number of companies quite big in Nigeria, and flew into London and had an appointment with me. The appointment was 1:30. I had another appointment at 2:30. And he sent me a text at 1:40-ish that he was running late. And I said, so you just realized after the time of the meeting that you were running late. Didn't realize you were running late at 1:15 or 1, because it's common sense, isn't it? You know how long it will take you to get to a place. And I just, so he came to send a message again at 1:45. I'll be there before 2. Eventually came at 2:25 for 1:30 meeting. And I said, I can't see you anymore. No matter how important you are or who sent you, we will have to reschedule this meeting. He was flying back to Abuja. So he said, can I just talk for 2 minutes? I said, yeah, have a seat, we'll talk for 2 minutes. but I will can discuss the issue you brought. Do you know, throughout that, when it came in and throughout that discussion, it didn't apologize for coming late because it was acceptable. As far as he was concerned, it was acceptable. And many times when you travel a lot, back and forth like I do, you see many Nigerians at the airport arguing with the luggage people. It's not too heavy. It's only just 1 kg, 2 kg over, because it was acceptable to have that. The rules say you have a limit to what you can carry, or you have to get to the boarding gate at such a time, but they wouldn't. So we need to begin to think as an organization, where are we going as an organization, as a company, as a business, as a society, as a community, and what are the kind of values, beliefs, and norms that will take us there? So we set our rules and expectations around those things. And initially some of that may be difficult for people to accept, but after a while, they would accept it and it becomes a norm. You just become used to it. It becomes second nature, and you get used to it. So these are some interesting thoughts I want to leave with you as you start this conversation amongst yourselves and moderated maybe by the program manager and the guests, who, by the way, we brought in at the very last minute, Dr. Charles Buckman. Mr. Stephen Clark was meant to cover this session, one of our consultants. I don't know whether that was said to you at the beginning. Some of you who may be familiar with some of our consultants, but he couldn't make this time. He had another urgent engagement. So Dr. Buckman is kindly doing this session for us. I suppose that's probably why his camera is off, because we put him in at the very last minute, but thank you for doing that. So I'm going to leave a few questions with you all to ponder about. So before that, just think about this. So one of my recent quotes was about culture, and we were looking at this when we're transforming. There's an organization we're working with here, 10,000 staff, and they brought in a new transformation, performance, and development program. And with 10,000 staff, it's not going to be easy to change the behavior across. So when they were reporting back, and we had one of these meetings recently, in the new performance model, it appears that some people, well, a lot of people actually, was still had difficulties with the kind of norms and behaviors and moving away from blaming. So you're a manager and someone's made a mistake, and rather than blame them, say it's your fault, you move from blaming to coaching. So you coach them, you ask the questions, what kind of steps would you take next time? Why do you think this was wrong? How do you think you can improve your performance? So people didn't found that quite difficult. Like, just tell me I'm wrong and tell me what to do. But no, that's not going to help us. We'll show you, you would analyze the situation and see how you were wrong. You can tell yourself how you're wrong and how you can improve the situation in future. So the feedback that was coming was different to what we put in that performance framework and what they were rolling out. And so I said to one of the executives, I said, well, what I see as a real culture is not what you say is a real culture. What I see is how people are changing their behavior and actions as you roll down this program. So it's that behavior and actions that will turn itself into norms and beliefs going forward.
That's right.
And then that becomes the culture. So I'll leave you with a few questions. One, we ask yourself, so what is culture? And you've started that conversation already. And and how does that culture impact an organization? Any change program that we've been part of, the biggest and most important part of the change program is culture change and culture transformation. And that's what makes a system what it is. That's what is sustainable. So we need to understand how that has affected. It would be great for you to give examples of how, of these things. So not just define culture, define impact, but just give examples of how it's affected that. So, and then come back to your role as leaders in the different perspectives, and what is your role in shaping that culture, in influencing that culture? So you can't write a culture. What you can do is shape culture, influence culture. And so how do you do that? How do you influence that? And then finally, why is it that important for you to lead and to change cultures? That's where I'm going to leave it this morning. So I won't take these seminars are only for about 90 minutes or 1 hour, I'm not sure. So I hope to be back with you shortly. In the meantime, I leave you in the good hands of the program manager, Loretta Malaka, and the guest faculty, Dr. Charles Buckman. Thank you very much, and I hope we have a successful discussion. I'll be back, like I said.
Yeah, thank you too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for that opening speech. You did leave us with questions on our minds, which we'll discuss and we'll share with you when you join us back later. Thank you very much for giving us a little time, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
one thing I took from that conversation was the importance of influence. Like Dr. Olasade mentioned, we're not robots, so you can't enforce anything. You have to be able to influence the minds of people, shape beliefs and mindsets, which looks like a very, I don't know, and we shouldn't use rules, How do we do that, right? And so much more would like to learn from Dr. Charles Buckman. So at this point, I'd like to invite you and would hear your opinion on this, and then we'll start taking comments from participants and questions as well.
Oh, good morning from England. Good morning from a city called Milton Keynes, like Dr. Olasade said. Milton Keynes is a beautiful place. I always say that's where Jesus lives. Anyway, but it's good. Loretta, you were excellent, and I want to say good morning to all the participants this morning. But there's a very interesting takeaway from what Dr. Olasade shared, which impacts our culture as a people from Africa, from West Africa. I'm from Ghana in West Africa, so I appreciate every point that is raised. The behavior of employees and this entire organization. One of the things I noticed over the years is that we've combined cultural values to organizational values. We don't draw a line. Like the gentleman that the example he gave about they say in my home, women, for example, women serve men. You cannot, in an organization, you cannot bring cultural values to the organizational values. And that's why we need a mindset shift. Totally. We must have it's not even a shift, it's a revolution. We must change our mindsets towards so many things that would help the companies or organizations go forward or develop strongly. It's about people. The vision is people, and people matter. People are important. Like he rightly said, people make the organization, people destroy the organization, people collapse organizations and stuff like. So we need to endeavor to work with people appropriately. Now, how do we correct some of these old values or old ways? The first thing I would suggest that every person does is in the way of course, the company would educate. There's education. Education means you are trained, you are coached, you are helped to imbibe the values and the contextually. Now, if we use Microsoft as an example, those of you that know of Microsoft, there's an environment there that everybody has bought into it. If you go, even Mr. Zuckerberg's company, for example, they have a dress down culture. They don't dress up, they dress down. But it doesn't affect productivity, it doesn't affect impact, it doesn't affect anything. It's what the person has to offer. But that's different from our culture back home. Now, here's what I would want you to notice. 3 things I would share quickly. Number 1, in order to go forward, first of all, I talked about mindset revolution, where we need to renew our mind towards the objectives of the company. Number 2, to go forward, we need to correct inappropriate behaviors instantly. Sometimes we drug matters. If the person behaves inappropriately, let's not drug matter. Let's first communicate by way of correcting instantly and let them understand, bring them back to speed as to the values the company holds, as to the values that we are as a group. Don't forget, it's a team effort. And remember, it's about people. It's about people. And the third thing is that we must periodically have issues, talk about issues that is affecting people. What tends to happen is that we have a culture of silence anyway. So if somebody is going through something, they don't want to talk about it. And then before you realize it has destroyed productivity or affected productivity. So we need to have conversations around issues in the organization. And so these are the 3 things I want us to talk about. So let's look at these things. It is important that it's about people. People are a problem, but people are a solution. There's got to be a collective approach driving the agenda, collective approach to driving the vision, the values, and even the traditions of the company, of the organization, beg your pardon. So it's got to be collective. It's not just one person appointed or the CEO or the GMD appointed to do it. All of us must be collective. Must be a collective environment. And then the final thing is about creating an enabling environment in the organization that people would find it not easy, but comfortable to look at issues or the lack thereof. If they have personal problems, you can progress in the environment. And that should be part of the values and culture and cultural values that the organization holds, that it's an environment that you will grow, but you need to understand it, you see. And one of the things I learned in organizational development is that people listen to reply instead of listening to understand. You see, when you're dealing with a matter, Loretta, people would always listen to reply you, but they don't wait to understand where you are coming from. I'm sure you've encountered it a few times. And so these are things that we need to look at. But let's let the conversation roll and we will learn as we go along. Thank you so much for this time. I'm here for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Seth, for pointing out those very 4 powerful pointers or tips in leading culture in our environment. And one thing, there's a lingua we use a lot here in Nigeria, something about shaking tables. And the conversation, what you said about, you said we are fond of converting cultural values into organizational values, and that was a table that you shook, right? That so I would like to hear from the audience, like, have they had that experience as well? I could just call on anyone on this on the screen right now to share what it's like. Have you had that experience where you see people taking what what happens in their homes, like the family values and or their cultural values, and they want to force it down on their teams, irrespective of where they're going. One thing that Dr. Olu mentioned is that we should understand, okay, where we're going as an organization and how we can begin to influence our people's thinking, their beliefs towards making that happen. So how do we do that? Renewing, you talked about renewing our minds to the objectives of the organization.
Absolutely.
How do we do that? How do we stop people from bringing in, this is what I understand? Because really, I think it can be quite difficult to, would I say, tear people away from what they've, been or lived for 20, 30, 40 years of their lives. This is how they've been. And then they're now coming into the organization and you now want to transform their minds. What does it take? What would the process look like? And you've already mentioned a challenge or a hiccup that a leader can meet, and that's the idea of people replying instead of listening and understanding your context. So how do you think that people can, or a leader can help his or her people to begin to let go of certain cultural values that they might, intentionally or unintentionally be bringing into the organization? So how did you do that, sir?
Well, it's interesting. I started by saying that one, it's an ongoing process. We correct inappropriate behavior instantly. Remember that. Deal with it instantly. And the next thing is create an enabling environment where you consistently begin to change behaviors, shaping their futures by coaching. Create a learning atmosphere. You see, and if it's not there, they only do what they know. I know we have some bad apples, but then if you're not careful, the bad apples would influence the good apples, if you know what I mean. And so as a leader, what you constantly do is to engage them, engage your team on a regular basis until it becomes, they've internalized the values that you've taught them, they've internalized everything, and it's a process. It's a process. And so you need to have a moment where you begin to see it happen. Perhaps a weekly team meeting or departmental meeting, depending on the size of the organization, but it's there and it trickles from the top to but remember, everything rises and falls on leadership. So if you have to consistently, progressively train, if you will, but in an atmosphere, in an organization atmosphere, it's the environment that matters. You see, the organizational culture and the behavior of the team, I think the two are synonymous. They go together. The behavior can enhance the culture, can enhance the organizational culture, and the behavior can also destroy the organization. And as you know, in West Africa, in Nigeria, for example, cultural values are held in high. It's like you give it examples. It's important, but obviously we're not there to sort of destroy the cultural values or eliminate the cultural values, but we are there to draw the organization's one. Perhaps along the line, one or two from the culture may have, but that's on an individual basis. You follow? It's individual behaviors. But as an organization, we must insist on the culture of the organization. And one of it is an enabling environment where we help people develop to enable them and empower them and go, because as they get better, so does the organization too. You follow my example? Yeah.
Yes.
But you need to, I want to emphasize a lot because I'm an African, I'm Omogana, but here we have to consistently correct inappropriate behavior because they don't know. You see, it's been instilled in them for years, like chauvinistic and this, especially dealing with women and all those kind of that diversity issues. But until they hear it, that's why I insist. One antidote is to correct inappropriate behaviors instantly. If you create that environment, they learn. You see, and then you consistently, because they know that over here, over this organization, if you don't behave in line, we will correct. We do it in love. We're not doing it to destroy. We're doing it as, because you remember we've created an enabling environment already. So they know that in this environment, you progress. We shape your future. You would learn. You would do. You would go forward. Productivity would go. They see it. They see it with productivity increasing. So they wonder, oh God, it's working. When everybody has a lackadaisical approach and laid back and I'll do it my way, like Doctor was sharing, come in, our time, our integrity with time is trouble. These are as this, it's endemic. It's in us, and it needs to go, because progressively the world is moving on. If we want to be a global entity, we need to, for example, over here, if you have an appointment with somebody and then you don't show up on time, it's a reflection of the culture of your personality. They may forgive you the first time, but if it becomes a habit that you consistently running late, trust me, you will not get another contract, or you would no, it doesn't work like that. You understand? And so these are, yes, we have strong cultural values that would help, but the main thing is the organization that you're working for. You need to imbibe the values there and begin to develop. And the action is when we consistently develop and train. What an environment. Can you imagine working in an organization where there's a lot of capacity building consistently? Organization would never. And that's what the what do you call them, the digital space in America, that's what they do. Consistently training and getting better every day. And it's become part of them. They can work anywhere. You know what I mean? They can fit in any organization. And this is what we want. We want to produce first-class team that we can fit in any organization with what we have. People will long to work with us because of where we came from. So there's a benefit. That's an ultimate benefit if we get things right slowly and renew our minds. But don't forget, let's correct inappropriate behavior instantly. Let's not delay, because it gets worse. Then it affects, it becomes a cancer in the organization. Loretta, you're good.
Thank you very, very much, sir, for that, for explaining and in fact, I would say you've already started the work of cultural transformation in our minds with, hitting down that nail of correct, wrong, correct,
inappropriate behavior.
Wrong action immediately.
Yes.
Inappropriate behavior immediately, because really there's the quote that children see, they do what they see you do and not what you tell them to. But the thing is that statement does not apply to children alone. If people, so you can tell people don't come to work late, but as the leader, they see you come to work late, or they see probably a high achieving person on the team that you allow to go on continue inappropriate actions, they'll take it that that's what you actually mean for them to do. So yes, it's very, very important that inappropriate actions are corrected and appropriate behaviors are encouraged and supported or rewarded.
I'll tell you.
Okay, go on.
I'll tell you, this is a person, I used to work for the civil service. I used to work with the government here. And I noticed my line manager, those times I was a young man, young fine boy. I used to, and he always came to work early. And I was wondering, so I thought perhaps he lived far. Sometimes when you live far away, you try to get to work. And he taught me a principle, and I'm going to share with you, everybody on this platform. He says, this is the culture and behavior he has adopted. And he's been in the civil service at that time, almost 30. I think he's retired now. He's an old man now. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave. In other words, he aimed to get to work half an hour before work starts. And he left half an hour after work to wrap up and put things in the right place for the next day. Now, that is something that if you do it, if you adopt, believe you me, this guy always had the best promotion. He was traveling everywhere because they knew they could rely on him. You know, reliability is demonstrated. It's not by accolades, it's by demonstration. Think about it. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave every day. So it wasn't long he became the line manager. It wasn't long he became the director, because the board could rely on him, his timekeeping, and that speaks volumes. Time is money to some of these organizations. And so those of you on the online today, I implore you, pick up all these little tips and then add, and you see a progressive trajectory like that, up. And he was so he had time to start the day well. He settled before everybody, the noise arrives. And then at the end of the day, he has time to shut down properly. In other words, and then he fixes his daily agenda the night before. So the 30 minutes is to prepare for tomorrow. So that's a culture, that is something that it's worth emulating. Thank you, Loretta.
Yes, sir. Yes, I agree. Thank you, sir. I have a very interesting comment in the comment section, and I'd like to invite Adito Adefala to share. I know you've already typed it in the comment section, but I'd like you to talk more to it. So I would read out while she turns on her video and share with us. I'll read out the comment. She said, not a question. I want to mention that in addition to the points Dr. Charles mentioned, correcting inappropriate behavior, creating an enabling environment, addressing issues, onboarding process is also an avenue to introduce the organizational culture and influence new entrants before they get corrupted by the bad apples. So leadership / HR should take advantage of onboarding / the orientation period. I think that is awesome. So we know that while we are trying to change culture of the people that are already in-house, the new people who we're bringing on board, we want to leverage that period to ingrain the culture. So Adito Adefala, I don't know, I would really like you to come online and share more, because the onboarding process is not really long. So how would you share, or how would you suggest that we go ahead and take advantage of this onboarding period?
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, madam.
Good morning. Okay.
Good morning. Please,
like I mentioned in my comments, oh, no.
Okay,
no,
it's fine. All right then.
Oh, okay.
All right then.
Okay, so like I mentioned in the comments that leadership should take advantage of the onboarding process. I think it's the best time to communicate the company values, the objectives, the mission, the vision, and general, acceptable behavior in the company to new entrants. It might be a short period, but at least when someone is coming into an organization, they have that first induction during their onboarding process. So I think it's the best time to communicate the vision, the mission, the values, how we behave, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable to people. If we don't take advantage of that moment, someone else in the organization will tell them, oh, this is what we do, this is how we do it. They get different kinds of information. Excellent. But when they have that information first from HR, they'll be able to sieve and say, no, this is what's HR, this is what I heard from, HR, and this is how things happen here. So I think it's the best time to take advantage of that. And then with continuous communication, and then, amongst the staff that are already in the company, already existing employees, constant.
I can't hear you anymore.
Oh,
Adito.
He's raised a very excellent point.
Mr. Chai, we allow it. Thank you. We allow it to linger on. People come in late, the managers are looking away, HR is looking away, nobody is talking. And then at the end of the day, it comes back to HR, oh, people are coming in late. But what do we do about it immediately, even as leaders, not just HR? someone in your department comes in late, what have you done about it? Did you speak with the person? Did you ask questions? Did you try to correct the person? And not just leaving everything to HR at the end of the day to say sanction this person, query this person and all that. So I think Mr. Charles' point of correcting inappropriate behavior instantly is very important, as well as, training new employees on acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. Thank you.
Yeah, no, this is excellent. This is an excellent point. What is the lady's name?
Adetun.
Beg your pardon.
It's fine.
HR, excellent point about HR. But like I said, it's a collective responsibility. You follow? HR will do the training, and there's 9 out of 10. That short training induction, it doesn't stay. That is why I recommended an enabling environment where you will constantly be coached. You can't, it's. I think it was Loretta who said it's like a baby. When a baby or a child will do what the influences from parental, where they watch what you do and not, those. Remember you said that, Loretta. It's so true.
Yes,
so
yes.
It's the environment which is important, but the influences. Leadership must influence that, and that comes through creating the enabling environment. In other words, their ability. One of the things that we need to instill is that we grow. We are a growing organization, and so we learn as we. When you create that is when you establish that in their minds, they know that, oh God, I'm going to get. And obviously, as you grow, you get rewarded. You see, and once they see that evidently in their lives, in their pay packets, quote unquote, you see that they will fall in place. But one of the things we need to eliminate, notice this, I use the word eliminate, is the culture of silence. Like Adeotu, I beg your pardon again, I'll call you Ade, like Ade suggested.
Ade.
You see that we need to break that culture of silence. Nobody wants to talk. That's an African thing. You don't want to, if a superior or somebody does something wrong, it's very, I don't know whether you've seen that in our culture. Nobody wants to address it. You follow?
Yes.
And so if the manager is coming late, nobody, he's the boss, he's Ogao, Belesa, Ogao, that, no. You've got to.
Yes.
And so if we're going to go forward, we need to adopt these. It's not radical, but it's important that we adopt those action, those behaviors would help. And you see the organization will thrive because it's different and it's progressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing.
I'm a Yoruba born. I'm a Yoruba man.
I can see that. Okay. I'm seeing more conversations in the chat box. Mr. Daniel Yume says agrees with Aditon's comments, and I would like to call him up to speak more on consequence management. But before then, let me read out his comments. He said, but it doesn't stop there. That it doesn't stop on onboarding during the onboarding period. There should be continuous communication, like you mentioned, sir, on those culture. Once in a while, the company should, from time to time, remind themselves on what those values are. Introduction of consequence management should be in place to keep people on track as to the culture of the organization. Mr. Daniel, would you like to come up and speak more to consequence management? If you're speaking, sir, I can't hear you because you're muted. Mr. Daniel, we can't still hear you.
I hope he's not in the in the lions. And Daniels are always, but he'll come. He'll come.
So while we wait for him to come online and share his to speak more on consequence management. That line of change, culture change is a collective responsibility, and it's even something that I've seen play out where we leave HR to be the police in the organization and then paint them as bad people, because they are the only ones that correct things. As a team, as an employee, when you see your colleague doing something wrong that is against what is in the policy or what you've learned in your onboarding session, it's very important that you call them out. And like you said, sir, that you should correct in love. So you see somebody doing something, you call them out, call them privately and say, oh, you shouldn't have done this. This is how to do this. And even when HR is calling, or when another member of the team is pointing out something wrong, another person can support it, because if everybody just keeps quiet, it feels like, we're not on the same table on that. So we should speak up. And even if we cannot speak up, when someone else is speaking up, we should lend our voices to it to enforce that, this behavior is not encouraged. This behavior is not good enough. So that's very, very important. So it's not just the leader's responsibility. It's not just HR. We shouldn't wait to team away days or bonding sessions before we start to call out and encourage one another once something is done wrong. I don't know if this. Okay, go on, sir.
Optics.
Yes, sir.
Where we can have little things on the walls or in the office, little quotes about the values. If it's, those things we put on walls.
Yes.
Words and things. Optics. The visuals also important. So they see it every day. They are coming to the office. They walk out in the shop floor, in the factory floor, wherever it is. It's there. It's there. That's the whole idea. Sometimes even at the entrance, the main gate, as you're coming in, it's something that would remind you of where the company is going. A quotation, something, you know what I mean, where it's done, and it all helps.
Yes.
So they see it and they do that. But I like the quick one I want to add this is the rewarding, which we don't do a lot in our culture and organizations. When they excel, some people do exceptionally well. There's a way of rewarding which will promote competitiveness. People begin to do, it's like a little package, maybe a voucher or something you reward by making it known at staff meetings. Like the retail people use like retail manager, sales manager of the month, and all those sorts of things. It also creates that, it also adds to growth, cultural growth, and it shapes the future of the people like rewarding. People like rewards, trust me. People, that if they are imbibing the culture of the organization and it's increasing productivity, it's doing so many things that are adding to the organization. Guess what? And if they are rewarded, they would like to do more. I know my people. Rewards, even if it's a little drop in their salary, and you put a little extra, if they earn say $1,000 a week and you add even $50 extra, it means a lot to them. Recognition is vital. Recognition is vital. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You've pointed out a very, very valid points there on recognition. And yes, you do know your people. Recognition and reward goes a long way. I want to ask, open up the floor. Does anyone have any experience that they would like to share? I can see that in the comment section, Phoebe, who is, she says she works here, and I believe here would be Nigeria, as a civil servant, where there's no orientation. And she remembers people that she met at the office saying, oh, we don't really do that sort of thing there. And her boss recently started being strict about attendance and attitude. And she feels that it's already late to start doing that. Phoebe, I don't know if you'd like to, you don't have to turn on your camera if you want to speak more and explain your experience, onboarding. Since you didn't have onboarding, how has it been like for you to now sort of, how is there a culture, and how are you living within that culture in your organization? Phoebe, would you love that you share with us? She's still on the call. Phoebe, yes, you're muted now, but I can't hear you. Okay, so if anyone else wants to share, you can just click on the reaction tab and raise your hands. I'll call you up and then you can share your experiences, or you can also add your comments. This meeting is for 90 minutes and we have about 14 minutes left to round up, and I would love to hear your opinions, your experiences on the topic of culture. I also have a comment here from Mr. Ayeni Aki. I think we can also engage people as roving eyes from time to time to oversee the activities. I think that this also buttresses the point of everyone, a collective responsibility in promoting culture or positive culture within an organization. Also create a speak up channel that will be confidential and kept away from the public. Everyone wants to protect him or herself from sanctions and hatred. Yes, we have that strong desire to be liked by our team, and that can also create a kind of silence culture where I just really want to be liked. So I don't want to see myself as a bad person. But really, if you the genuine love for someone is when you can call them out and say what you're doing it's not correct, right? It's not helpful to you as a person, to your career as a person, and even to the organization. So the option of creating confidential channels that people can share is also a very good one that should be encouraged. And yes, reinforcement. So yeah, I want to throw this conversation open. I know that I have two persons here from HR that I would like to answer the question, and everyone else who, even if you're not in HR, but of course you're an employee somewhere and you would like that, you like the idea of reward and recognition, and you want to share opinions or ideas or that an organization can promote or encourage, carry out or implement the action of reward and recognition. Dr. Charles has already mentioned, a little increase in your salary or your incomes. If it's 1,000, just 50,000, $50 more or $100 more would go a long way. Or just having that, I know that I've gone to eateries. They do this a lot in eateries and banks as well, where there's the salesperson for the month and all of that, or for the week that's and they're celebrated. So what other ways can be? And I would like to call Adito Adefala again to share if you have ideas on how companies, organizations can, promote or reward hard work or appropriate behavior in an organization. And Mrs. Ruth Didam of VOA. If you're here, I would also like you to share how organizations can reward or recognize good behavior in an organization. And if you are doing something different from the two examples that have been cited, please share with us so that when we leave here, it's something that we can also start implementing in our organization. So while I wait for Adito Adefala or Mrs. Didam to share their opinions, I would like to read a question from Felicia to you, sir. It says, how can we discourage the act of psychophancy in an organization? Again,
instantly. These are things, culture that is in us. We picked it, we are bringing it into the organization. Behavior is not just developed on the job. Don't forget, they've grown in different environments and people have come in, but it's our responsibility to sort of renew their minds. Remember, we started by that, you see, there's a word from my favorite book, the Bible. It said something, you cannot put new wine into old wineskin. In other words, they can't bring the past or where they've been before into this new culture. You follow? And so to avoid sycophancy, again, instantly, when you notice that somebody's doing that, help the person. Sometimes they don't know. They don't have confidence in themselves. So they think by, quote unquote, sucking up the boss, it works for them. No. Just do your work and do it effectively. So you begin without being rude, without being obnoxious, but you do your work and do it well. If we start that before you realize people are adopting, they are, as they say, flowing into the new environment that we are in. But it's up to all of us. You see, in every organization, you have sycophants. You have people that will, you know what I mean, they will suck up to the boss, they will do things. Some of them even do it secretly. You don't even know. Some of you don't even know. They go for, maybe they go to wine bars with the big men without you knowing, and stuff like that. But once you identify it, you correct it. Once you identify it, those behaviors can be corrected. You have to correct it by telling them that it's not appropriate that they do that. The culture of the organization must be, one, adhered to. Two, it must be constantly reviewed and seen, because people are different. People change. See, but one thing I've learned over the years is that people are the same wherever you go. So sometimes the principles that we adopt is as a result of seeing people's behavior, and then we begin to add it to what we know and what we don't know. So she's right. Sycophancy is rife in Africa. And one of it is because of lack of self-confidence. You know, they don't, and also, I noticed one of the comments was talking about those who are unschooled. We have quite a few that too. So remember, we said enabling environment. We create to grow, help people grow. Any organization that helps people grow. You see, one of the things I want you to remember, people never forget the institution that they've been to. In other words, as much as we're there for profits and to increase our premium and all that, we need to remember that people must also grow. If the people grow, the organization grows. You see, and we need to constantly develop. Remember, we started by saying that organizations are about people. People are the problem, but people are also the solution. I've learned that over the years, that you'll be amazed what people can do, given the right environment for them to progress. So those little behaviors that are adverse to progress, or they're not good for progress, we need to deal with it instantly. Remember the expression, correct inappropriate behavior instantly. If there's one thing you shouldn't forget today, is this statement. It helps. It helps. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Loretta.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I'm coming to Abuja.
For your response to that question. You're welcome. We're looking forward to having you, sir. We're looking forward to having you. So yes, correct wrong behavior, inappropriate behavior. Correct immediately. Psychophancy. If you see a team, if you see a correct inappropriate behavior instantly. If you see a team member acting, giving eye service and all of them, let them know that it's the delivery on your work that pays, not you trying to suck up to your boss or something. Even if you are, the fact that you still do not deliver will still show. It will still show. And for me, I always tell everyone around me to think long term. Think long term, think long term, think long term. So the thing is that whatever actions you want to put up, you want to leave a place knowing that she put in effort. He did this when he was here. He did this and he did that. Let us not be there, because when you're being a psychopath, everybody sees it. You think that they cannot see what you're doing, but it's obvious, it's evident. So instead, why not channel your energy into doing your work? Like my colleague would say, do what you're paid for. Why don't you go ahead and do what you're paid for, other than trying to do that? So another thing is that I want to encourage us on the call too. If you've also seen yourself or caught yourself, being a psychopath at some point, you want to look back and ask yourself why. What's driving this behavior? Dr. Charles has mentioned that could be the issue of low self-confidence or low self-esteem. There are ways that you can start working on that. There are books to help you. You can go for therapy sessions or speak with a coach so that you can improve your self-esteem and you'll be confident in your skills and your abilities to deliver, and not trying to suck up to your boss. So there's HP. We have just 5 minutes to the end of this webinar, so I would run through. I have Eniola Diosho, who's also reacting to Phoebe's comments. He said, it's rather unfortunate. It is the responsibility of the director, that would be admin and human resource of your MDA, to ensure that you're properly onboarded. So that's why we hold these webinars, and we hope that we can reach out to HRs. I'm happy that we have a couple of HR officers here, that these things should be normalized, especially in the civil service, where new people brought on board are taught, what are we expecting this MDA? What are we known for? What's the quality of service that we give here? So it's very, very important. So while we're also doing that, we want to ensure that the persons that have already been there for a long time also know what the values are, because culture is a thing that is inherent in any organization, whether you actively work on it or not. It is there. So, but what do you want new entrants to see when they come in? So we should work on that. And Phoebe is also responding to the comments around creating channels, for people to speak up. And one thing that Dr. Charles buttressed on this call was creating safe environment, creating a conducive, enabling environment. And she said, the speak up channel should come up when you have a confidential boss. My boss will not think twice to call staff meetings and who said what. So we would just prefer to stay mute or follow the trend. So we keep bringing new wine in old wineskin. So it's a very, very terrible situation there, where you have a boss that cannot keep things confidential. So that he or she might just come up to the meeting and say, oh, Mr. A told me that Mr. B did that and busted.
That's a bad leader.
So yeah. So that's a comment from Phoebe. And then we have Samuel saying that it's important to act and communicate as a leader on organizational culture, because this rubs off on subordinates, and which help to influence their behavior and attitudes in the long run. So it's very, very important that we act. That's the word. And it's something that Dr. Lasade described during his opening speech, during the keynote address. He talked about action. Action was one thing he talked about. So you need to act it. You need to act it. It's not what you're saying that we're looking at, but what you're acting. So yes, I want to, at this point, thank everybody for contributing, for their comments, for speaking up. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Okay, we have a question, but we'll not be able to take it, but
let's try it.
It's saying, how do you manage culture among unschooled staff? HP, I would really have preferred if you had your full name. Do you want to just explain more what you mean unschooled staff? Do you want to unmute yourself and explain what you mean by unschooled staff, so that Dr. Charles can take your question?
Okay, my name is Damilola. I was thinking of the appropriate word to use. Yes, I was thinking of the appropriate word to use, but I think that was just the word that came to my mind. When you have uneducated staff.
Precisely.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. Because again, it's a reflection on the organization to employ people that are not qualified. And it's up to HR to help develop them to come to the level that you are. Maybe they will do courses, short courses to help them. Because it's one thing putting out principles, but it's another thing them comprehending what you are saying. And it's difficult when you're dealing with people that cannot comprehend your level. I don't know whether you've been in that position before, Loretta, where you are trying to explain to the person, but the person that cannot comprehend
just doesn't seem to get it. Yes.
It's the most difficult bit. But like the good question she's raised, and that's a reflection on management to employ people that don't have the capacity to do what they're supposed to do. And then it puts the onus upon you, and the burden is on you to try and help them. But remember, we created an enabling environment. We have to be able to tolerate and take all sorts of people and bring them in. Everything rises and falls on leadership, and leadership will create an enabling environment. And I've enjoyed this immensely. I hope we can do it again.
Yes, definitely, sir. It's been a very interesting conversation, on organizational culture, and I know how hard it can be. You don't want to speak up, you don't want to hurt feelings. So many things that comes up with interacting and influencing people. So I want to say a big thank you to everyone who has commented, shared, and okay, Damilola says thank you. So I believe that her question was properly answered. Thank you to everyone who has shared their experiences in their places, in their place of work. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who has also dropped their comments. And I want to say a special thank you to you, sir, Dr. Charles Popran. I know we reached out to you yesterday evening, and you said yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you too, Loretta. You are excellent.
Reached out to wasn't feeling too well, so thank you so much, sir. Thank you to everyone. Oh, it will be a pleasure to have you. It will be a pleasure to have you. Yes, sir. So usually our webinars hold the last Thursday of every month. So next month we have another webinar. The topics will be sent, or the team for the conversation will be sent to you. For our emails are so open to you. You can share ideas, whatever you would like us to speak on our next conversations. Please, you can send it to our email. Winifred Obama is going to drop our email in the chat box, so you know where to email us in case you want us to discuss a topic. Please let us know. And immediately after this call, or before the close of business today, you'd also receive the replay so that you can listen again to this conversation. The email is already in the chat box, info@firstleadershipacademy.com. So if you have any questions, if you'd like us to speak on a topic in our upcoming webinars, please let us know, and we'll be happy to take on the conversation. So I want to say once again, thank you to everybody, and do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you.